Chapter 8. "Okay, boys, listen up," Coach Gorman announced in a booming voice after the boys had finished skating around the ice to limber up. It was Saturday, game day, and Coach Nanton had somehow managed to get an hour of precious ice time on Saturday morning for a hastily called special practice. Fortunately, the entire team with the exception of Tim and Jade showed up. The boys skated over to Coach Gorman. "Here's the deal. We've lost two good men, Tim and Jade." A rattling of hockey sticks on the ice indicated the team's agreement. "Here, what we're going to do, men," boomed out Coach Gorman. Milt knew that boys liked to be referred to as men, whereas his male friends generally said they were going out with the boys. "It's going to be tough, but no one said it was going to be easy. We're down two good men, but we're still going to win the Division Cup for Tim." Win the Division Cup, without Jade. The players looked at their coach as if he were crazy. "No, it's not crazy," said Coach Gorman, reading the expressions on their faces. "We have a secret weapon. Weatherby, I didn't mention it the other day, but Weatherby has won more state championships than any other coach in the history of this state." The coach conveniently omitted the fact that these had all been in girls' basketball, not boys' hockey. No need to bother the team with the details. With that introduction, the gate beside the penalty box opened, and out came Weatherby. To keep from falling, Weatherby had brought a walker with her, and she shuffled along clinging to the square aluminum frame, picking it up and moving it with each step. Move frame, shuffle. Move frame, shuffle. Alan walked beside her but respected her pride and let her walk on her own. Slowly but steadily, Weatherby moved into position beside Milt. "Today we're going to do only one thing," she told the boys in a surprisingly strong voice. "Stopping. Coach Nanton, a demonstration, please." While the boys' attention had been focused on Weatherby crossing the ice, Gus Nanton had skated down to the far end of the rink. "No problem," he called out to Weatherby. Short, fast running steps started Gus Nanton moving toward Weatherby. Then long, smooth strides built up power and speed. The faster he moved, the faster he pumped his legs. By the time he neared Weatherby, he was going full out. Several of the boys began to cry out, sensing a crash was inevitable. Weatherby held her ground and didn't flinch. At the last possible second, Gus Nanton turned his body sideways and let the sharp steel edges of his blades cut deeply into the frozen surface, throwing up a shower of ice shavings. The blades ground deeper as he slowed over a 3-foot slide, and then with a slight ankle twist to set them even deeper, the blades caught and held. Gus came to a sudden halt 2 feet in front of Weatherby. The boys watched in awe as Weatherby, seemingly oblivious to what they'd seen as an escape from certain disaster, smiled at Coach Nanton and brushed flakes of ice off her sleeve. "That was very nice," Weatherby said, calmly turning to the boys. She said, "Stopping is the first skill we have to master. Once you can stop, you can afford to go fast. You can afford to cut in and steal the puck. Stopping puts you in control. If you're going to win, you have to be in control of the puck, and that means being in control of yourself. We're going to spend the rest of this hour practicing stopping." Turning toward Milt, Gus, and Alan, she said, "Gentlemen, the team is yours." Before the practice, she had made the three promise her one thing: no negative feedback. They could make suggestions for improvement to the boys, but only after praising progress. "It's simple," she told them. "To stop, you have to turn your body sideways and let the skate bite the ice. We can agree that every boy on the team has the strength to turn and push his skate into the ice." "Right," the three had agreed. Question, why don't they do it? Answer, because they're afraid they'll get it wrong and go head over heels onto the hard ice. Right? Of course right. Our challenge is giving them the confidence to do it, not thinking that they need to be taught to turn and dig in. Your job today is to give them confidence. Remember, what looks like a skill problem is often something else. And so Milt, Gus, and Alan had the boys skate and stop, skate and stop. The boys worked on their own, and the three coaches moved from boy to boy, watching, praising, building confidence, watching again, and praising progress. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Nothing happened in 15 minutes either. At the 20-minute mark, the popcorn began to pop. All over the rink, the sound of blades crunching sideways into ice could be heard, along with cries of, "Hey, coach, did you see that?" By the end of the practice, every single boy was stopping properly. Several were trying to go fast enough and stop sharp enough to send a spray of ice shavings into the air. The game that night was notable for several reasons. First, Tim showed up. In a wheelchair and with his head swathed in white bandages, he was rolled into the locker room before the game by Alan. One by one, the boys became aware of the wheelchair coming through the door. The bubbling enthusiasm of the 10-year-olds subsided. As Tim stood and walked slowly to his usual spot on the locker room bench, cheers, clapping, banging sticks, loud shouting, and questions greeted him. "All right, boys, give him some room," said Alan. The boys may have heard, but they still swarmed around Tim until the 5-minute warning bell sounded, and they were forced to don their equipment and head for the ice. "Go get them, guys," Tim called out as the team left the locker room. He sat back down in his wheelchair. A moment later, Alan noticed Tim's fingers gripping hard on the side rails of his chair as the boys' cheer echoed back down the ramp. "Pum nim, cat nim. This is our pledge to Tim. Chemo, Dara stamps. Riverbend will be the champs. Where tear tainy gleam. Warriors are a high-five team." It was the first time Tim had heard it. "The boys felt really bad about bumping into you, and so," Alan began to explain. "That wasn't their fault. It just happened," Tim broke in. "Nevertheless, they felt bad," said Alan, leaving aside the issue of blame. Had the coaches done their job and taught stopping properly as a confidence issue rather than a skill issue, might the accident have been avoided. "Everybody wanted to do something for you, so we decided to win the Division Cup in your honor." Tim couldn't wait for the night and the chance to tell his mom. In the hospital, he'd had no doubt that she was with him all the time. She had said that if he ever really needed her, she'd be with him. He hurt. He needed her. Now that he was back home, there were times he was lonely, especially at night when his dad was at work and he knew the team was practicing or playing. But he didn't hurt now, and he was no longer frightened. He didn't need his mother so desperately, and the night was again their special time together. Tim's arrival at the game was the first notable event, and the second was equally momentous. The Riverbend Warriors tied the game. It wasn't the top team in the league, and the other team was missing 2 of its best players plus its best goalie. But the Warriors didn't have Jade either, and they tied. Without Jade to fall back on or to set the agenda, the boys began to play differently. Paradoxically, it was their stopping ability that really got them going. Weatherby was right. When they could control themselves, they could control the puck, at least better than they'd ever been able to before. Speed, agility, and digging into a clashing of sticks to grab the puck, they discovered, were all easier when they felt in control. The only one missing from the game was Weatherby. "You don't need me," was all she'd say to Alan when he tried to arrange a time to pick her up. But she was there for Tuesday and Thursday practice the following week, and again they drilled basic skills: stopping, puck handling, shooting on the net, and passing. The game on Saturday night was their best yet. Tim was in the stands, on crutches now, and Weatherby again declined to attend. They lost, but what a loss. The final score was 7-5, and in the third period they scored 2 goals and held the Northside Raiders to 1. They won the third period, against one of the best teams in the league. Alan phoned Weatherby, as he'd promised to, right after the game to give her the results. "Fantastic. Tuesday we'll work on individual goals for every player. Then Thursday we'll move on to the third thing all great teams have in common." "And that is," Alan prompted. "What we'll do Thursday," answered Weatherby. "Consultants charge by the hour. No sense telling you everything all at once." Sure enough, on Tuesday they started setting out practice goals and game goals with each player. Weatherby recorded these in a 3-ring binder, 1 sheet for each player. Milt worked on the one for Jerry, their first string. "Well, Jerry, what are your goals for a game?" asked Milt. "Stop 'em all," said Jerry. "Great idea," Milt laughed. "Let's put that down in big letters across the top. A shutout is a perfect game. What's a good game?" "Let in 3 goals," Jerry ventured. "If there were 100 shots on net, I'd say that was pretty good. But what if there were only 4 shots?" "Not so hot," Jerry said. "So let's try to set some goals for you based on what might actually happen. That way you'll know you've played a great game even if sometimes the puck goes in your net." And so it went. Every player met with one of the coaches. Together they worked out specific performance goals for both practices and games, and these were written down. Weatherby found herself working with Larry, the one the coaches, among themselves, called Shoot Larry Shoot. Weatherby knew that, like Jade, Larry wasn't inclined to pass the puck once he had his stick on it. Unlike Jade, he didn't have great skills. "Larry, how often do you think you should pass in a game?" Larry looked puzzled by the question. "Half the time," ventured Weatherby. "That might be all right," said Larry dubiously. Then he added in a much brighter voice, "If you're not on a breakaway, that is." "That happen often, breakaways." "Lots," said Larry with a big smile. Alan, who had been standing nearby and listening to this exchange, also smiled, glad that someone else was working on goals for Shoot Larry Shoot. Weatherby, after working with Larry on the exact definition of breakaway, eventually had Larry agree to an 80% pass rate, including breakaways. "How'd you do that?" said Gus as he looked at the sheets after practice. "Trickery," said Weatherby. "We're tricking the other teams. If Larry passes 80% of the time and shoots 20, they'll have a tough time anticipating what he's going to do. Smart man, our Larry. Most of the time he'll pass but then shoot when they least expect it. I told him his shots on goal may go down, but his shots in goal would certainly go up." Although he didn't know it at the time, that evening Alan began a process that would lead to a new career. All he thought he was doing was entering into his home computer a list of all the things he'd learned about teamwork, beginning with George Burton's farewell line. "You do great on your own, but the rest of your team isn't doing very well. I need people who can work together for our goals. Sure, you'd score less, but the team would score a whole lot more." At the time, Alan couldn't bring himself to agree with Mr. Burton. Now, Tim, Jade, Jerry, Larry, and Weatherby had taught him to understand what teamwork really meant. Reluctantly, he could see that Mr. Burton had a point.